Hello and welcome. Hopefully, you guys are doing well today. So, we're going to start out the stream with a retrospective, a look back at the Myst series. Now, for those of you that don't know, we've been playing through the entire Myst series from Myst 1 to 5, including Uru and Abduction. In this retrospective, we're not going to include Abduction as it's not related to the same world as Myst. It just makes allusion and funny jokes towards Myst in the series. So that won't be included in this kind of retrospective here, but all the other ones will. So we're just going to kind of, at first we're going to go through each of the titles one by one, talk about their strengths, talk about their weaknesses, talk about the design philosophy that they may have had as they were developing. And of course, a lot of this is going to be speculation and opinion. This is not meant to be like a, well, this is actually what happened kind of thing. This is just kind of us talking about the series as a whole. And then we'll do kind of a comparison of like which ones we liked and why we liked ones over the others. Excuse me, and so on and so forth. So, and then at the end, I will reveal my listing of my favorites in what order. So, I have basically it's a top 6 list of where I rank the Myst games in comparison to each other. Again, this will include Uru in the list, but it won't include Abduction. We'll talk probably a little bit about Abduction as we reference other games. But like I said, since it's not part of like the Myst canon technically, I'm not going to include it in this Myst series retrospective. So let's start with Myst 1. So Myst 1 was the kind of the catalyst event, right? That is the game that kicked all of this off. It was a puzzle game separated into 4 worlds. I believe it's 3. There's Channelwood, Stone Ship, and the Rocket Ship place. So I guess it's just 3. I mean, you got Myst Island itself, which has its own series of puzzles, so I guess you can include that in there. No, there was the Mechanical Age too, wasn't there? Yeah, there's 4. I was right the first time. Sorry about that. should have written some notes down. But yeah, so like this is the one that started it off, and the main gameplay. You first have to discover how to interact or how to open the ages, right? That's your first big puzzle. Some of them are easier to get, such as like Channelwood or the Mechanical Age. I think those are probably the 2 easiest ones to get puzzle-wise. I don't think Stone Ship is as complicated either. The Rocket one, the reason why I would say it's probably the most complicated is you not only have to solve, which isn't hard because the tower rotates, you have to solve how to get to it, but you have to find these like 2 switches that aren't directly on a path, and it's hard to find those little hidden paths sometimes. So I feel like that one had an extra level of difficulty if you weren't paying real close attention to what directions you could go. So, and then once you actually unlock the ages, you would go in their ages, and most of them had like a singular puzzle that you had to solve, right? So in Stone Ship, you had to turn the lights on at the bottom of the ship, right at the bottom of the broken cargo part of the ship. And that was done through a series of draining water from certain areas, draining and filling water from the lighthouse. Eventually, you find a secret door, which is rather easy to miss even with the lights on. So that's another one of those like hidden path puzzles. And then you got the compass, which was a bit hard to read, but it's easy to solve if you think about it as like in relation to a compass and direction. So that's that stone ship. Mechanical Age was about sounds. The rocket ship was a maze. It was about getting through this maze, also based in sound. Um, and Channelwood was about water flow. So they each kind of had their own thematic puzzles. And then of course, you finish the game by either bringing all the red pages, all the blue pages, interacting with the white book twice, or bringing the white page to the white book. And that's how you got basically your 4 endings. So, and that's what set the standard for what will be kind of comparing the rest of these two. Now, just because the games don't end up or take a different development ideal from the first one doesn't necessarily mean they're bad. It just means that they're different. And I want to stress that because we're about to move into Myst 2. Right? And it's technically not called Myst 2, it's called Riven, sequel to Myst. It's interesting because that I feel like that's kind of important because this game handles puzzles completely differently, right? You're not moving between different ages, to get access to puzzles to solve the major dilemma. This one, your goal is to trap a character's father and save his wife. It all takes place, with the exception of one scene, basically, all takes place on Riven, which is what this series of islands is. I don't know if it classifies as an archipelago, but it's definitely a series of islands. So it's one of those that you have to go around these different islands and find a way to engage with what's available. Now, this game definitely maneuvered around the idea of the environment and how you interact with it is mostly the puzzle, with exception of, I would say, like 2 or 3 things. There's a few puzzles that are just like kind of puzzles. Here though, in Riven, they were more focused on how do you get to places that you can't get access to currently, right? Do you go through ductwork? Do you go through do you have to lift a stair from one side and walk your way around? And they're closing doors, which is a thing how you get access to 2 necessary areas. So this one definitely did a lot more with the environment being the puzzle and less of here's a panel or here's an area, engage with the puzzle that way, right? So, like in comparison to Myst 1, when you go to the Mechanical Age, you have these stations that once you turn them on, they all play a sound, and then you have to match the radar to that sound so that you can be like, this is the water sound, this is the air sound, so on and so forth. Whereas here, it's more like, how do I get to that bridge? How do I get to this doorway? How do I get it's basically a series of locked doors, with a few exceptions, and we'll talk about those in a second. That you have to, find the key for, right? And then you get to basically the end game puzzle, which expects you to basically get information from at least 3 different places, but technically like 4, right? So it's not like Myst where all your your interactables and solutions are like in one little area where you can just kind of figure it out from there. This one, every island almost has some bit of information for you to kind of grab and use to solve the big puzzle. And that's why I used this specific image, is because that is where your final puzzle is, right? Technically, there's one puzzle after it, but it's just repeating a sound you hear on a desk into an elevator. That's the official last puzzle, I would say, so that you can free the wife. But yeah, you could tell that the design philosophy changed. This game went for more of an aesthetic and environmental design based gameplay, right? Where one of your puzzles is literally, can you remember to close a door? Um, because believe me, it's harder than you think. Not the closing of the door, the finding out that you need to close the door. But yeah, this one, there was a lot of focus on aesthetic. They did a lot of the out of the box, or at least one major out of the box thinking puzzle. It wasn't as straightforward as, I've seen this design on the wall. That means that's I'm going to use that thing. Um, no, it was you had to look at the environment and how it was shaped based on the location of specific orbs, right? And that's how you would unlock, the one scene that doesn't take place in Riven. Um, and that took a lot of out of the box thinking. Like it's not something I don't think anybody on their first playthrough without some sort of assistance or whatever would immediately go, that shape with that orb makes this thing, and I need to jot that down. Like, no. You probably see it, or maybe even subconsciously see it, but like actively, you don't look for that thing until you know you need to look for that thing. Now, I'm not sure because we played it on stream, of course, and some people are like, "Hey, you should look at this cave entrance or whatever." Um, I'm not sure how long that would take a normal player to kind of find. Um, but I figured that may be a puzzle that stumped a lot of people. Um, maybe even more so than the golden orb. So, like I said, this one seemed to have a different design philosophy. It's definitely more about the environment, and the aesthetic, and less about puzzle hubs, right? So overall, you could see a change in the developmental mindset. And now that moves us, because we're talking about, hubs, that moves us into Myst 3. So, Myst 3 is where things get interesting, because it tries to combine basically Riven and Myst one's design philosophies, right? It tries to take the puzzle hub, such as Amateria here, or however you pronounce that, and mix that with the environmental storytelling of Riven. So in I would say the forest to the tree world. I don't remember what that's called. Um, that one is definitely about like paying attention to the environment, fighting little side paths, and interacting with little things to get from place to place. It's the series of doors that need keys kind of thing. Whereas this place that I'm showing here was, here's a puzzle, here's a puzzle, here's a puzzle. There's 3 puzzles. Technically there's 4 once you get to the end of it, but here's these puzzles. Here's your, sphere of influence, interact with them, which is very Myst 1. So you can definitely see the design philosophies kind of melding together in Myst 3. And much like the other games, the acting is really well done. The sound is really well done. We didn't talk about it too much in Myst and Myst 2, or well, yeah, Myst 2, Riven. But basically all your interactions with characters are through full motion video, right? So it's real people set into a pre-rendered world. But this one, there was a large focus on a single character, which is your villain of the series, right? Or of the not the series, but this game. But this one's interesting because it took a step back and was like, what if we took kind of the basic knowledge of the thing and kind of turned it a little bit? Because the premise of the game is that you're going through each of the training ages that the sons from the first game were supposed to go through. So it's interesting to see, you as the character go through this, because you're like, wow. One, they've been changed because the villain broke them, and you have to kind of pick up the pieces and still solve it. But two, it's also like, this is how Atreus, which was the main character from the first 3, well, not the main character, but the main actor, I guess, from the first 3, and how he trained his sons, as they grew up and kind of discovered how worlds worked. Um, But this one was more of a return to Myst 1 with a little bit of that Riven aesthetic and environment exploration stuff, right? Um, and it's just it did some really interesting things. We did get stuck in our playthrough because I forgot I could turn around in a tube, tube being like a hollowed out log. Um, but that's the thing is like hidden paths, you know, or hidden paths, smaller paths are very common throughout the series. Especially, you know, I even in Myst 1, I told you there's at least 2 areas that you're supposed to be able to access, but you have to find that they're kind of off the beaten path. So that totally makes sense in Myst 3. So now we're gonna move on to Myst 4. Now Myst 4 is where things get interesting, because this one apparently, from what I've been told, now once again this might be just speculation, this one didn't do too well. Overall, I think it still did a fine job of going through the Myst series. Like, it definitely fits in. I don't feel like it was too detached. I do feel like they had another kind of design philosophy adjustment here, because in essence you only go through 3 ages, but instead of the ages be like one central puzzle, well, I take that back. With the exception of Spire, there's not really a central puzzle. It's more like a bunch of puzzles that lead you to where you need to be, right? So that's very it's like Riven if the doors had puzzles on them, right? So it's still very much in the vein of the Myst games. And also, like, Spire, from what I was told while I was playing, is like Spire was probably some people's least favorite level. I can understand why from some point, but I also think it still felt very Myst-like. Like, I felt like this place was a bit more Myst-like than Haven, which is other, um, the other age you'll go into to get some information. The last one you go into is basically the last area, and you have to, you know, do the, once again, it's like locked door, how do I get through? Locked door, how do I get through? And then some of them just have puzzles on them. So like the design philosophy is still rather intact when once we get to Myst 4. There's some interesting and relatively funny acting slash voicing choices in this one. Aknar looks to be, you know, a very good actor, but when he's reading from his journals and stuff, it seems to be a little less believable, I guess. And we all know voice acting is not an easy thing. You just flip a switch and become a voice actor, right? So he still did a good job for what he was given. I just feel like he's so much better when he's on camera. It makes a bit more sense than when he's off. But yeah, the acting, there's more actors in this one, actors and actresses, performers in this one, than I think basically any of the other ones. Maybe more than any of the other ones combined, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, there's quite a few full motion video performers in this one. The one stumbling block we had with this one is there was information on papers that were strewn throughout the level, and when you're trying to find a sheet of paper, you know, like this big on the screen, and a world that's got like, you know, 20 screens, it's a bit harder to do. But we did get through it. I didn't struggle with it as much, or other people had some specific struggles with it. I didn't really have too much of an issue with it, but the design philosophy for that area is the only thing that's kind of iffy for me, and it's because it basically just looks like gray stone everywhere, which is good because it allows the like electronics to stand out a bit better. But other than that, it was just like it was being like stuck in a tower, which given was the point, but it's still, like, from an aesthetic standpoint, wasn't as interesting as things that had come before. Haven is kind of a run-of-the-mill jungle scene as well, so it was one of those that's like, maybe the aesthetic wasn't as important for this one as the things they were trying to get across. It's definitely, you could tell that the performances were super important to the interactions of this one. Also, I think this is the first one where we get books, books and journals and stuff like that that is actually read by the character that wrote them. I think that is probably the best addition to the series. Unfortunately, there's only two other games in the series after this one, and I think only one of them did voiced reading, which makes sense because another one was an MMO, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, this one I can see why there was a bit of a, you know, a to and fro with the like dislike of this one, because you could see where they're like, we want to stay true to Myst, but we also want to do some different things. Now, I will say our playthrough was probably a little bit more frustrating at points because we were plagued by a weird mouse bug. For some reason, whenever I moved my mouse, the cursor would go like. And if you know anything about this game, there's a part where you have to carry an object in the actual cursor, and if you jump at all, it goes away. So having to carry this thing with the mouse doing that was a bit tedious. But that, once again, that was just a tech issue on our part. And if anybody else runs into that issue, you'll know what I'm talking about. I do recommend getting a mouse that doesn't have a DPI switch. That seemed to have fixed the issue. I think it's just because the game wasn't built for a mouse that has change in DPI. But I did want to point that out while we were talking about Myst 4. Now, let's go ahead and move on to Myst 5. Oop. This is where things get interesting. Okay. And I picked this image specifically because I wanted to reference this mechanic. This is your major mechanic. Now you're like, what? I thought this was a Myst game, right? Your major mechanic is going to solve puzzles through blah, blah, blah. Yes and no. Those puzzles still exist, right? You still have to interact with things to solve puzzles to open a door so you can progress. However, sometimes the door is a symbol, right? The thing that allows you to progress is getting this symbol. And then you draw the symbol, and as you see from the bottom right down there, they get saved if they're correct. Now, I didn't have a chance to grab the screen I wanted to grab, but this mechanic isn't as, what's the word for it? Isn't as, I guess, polished as it could have been. I'm not sure. They were doing some new tech with this at the time, and it's a really cool idea. But I feel like this is, because of this, they kind of diverted from what was a Myst game. There's of course references, and you're trying to solve this calamity, and they have characters that are from the previous series, and you get a little bit more information on that. But this is also the first one. Not chronologically, we'll talk about the other one in a second, but this one expects you to move around in third person. Also, all the characters are 3D models, so they dropped the full motion video for the most part, with the exception of these the little viewers. The viewers still have a full motion video, even though it's like this part of their face. Like it's really weird. But this was a change you could tell in the philosophy of, well, the gaming world is evolving, so we kind of have to evolve with it. Did it succeed? I don't know, honestly. I can't speak to the numbers or anything like that, but I feel like this probably caused them quite a struggle, because this mechanic, although cool, is really wonky. Now, the reason why I say that is you can actually accidentally get to the last part of any puzzle by this drawing. And you're like, oh, well, maybe it's just because you have the line off or whatever. We solved there. I don't think it's this place. Okay, so in the bottom here, I'll go ahead and hide my camera. Where are you? So if you see down here in the bottom left, you see that there's like 3 circles and the lines to them. That is your major like mechanic for the area, right? Turn it back on. I can actually move up and point. So right here below me, right? this is your major mechanic for the area. You can see that down there. We did one of these, and that mechanic was supposed to be like a sandstorm, right? Which was 3 wavy lines. Okay, easy enough to draw. We did it, no problem. Well, later on we get a thing that gives us like a color code. So I was like, hey, maybe if we just draw the color code on the tablet, maybe something funny will happen. Well, for some reason, RRGB gave us the wind. So that 3 wavy lines was now RRGB, the letters, right? So I although it is a cool mechanic, its implementation was a bit rough. Also, because we were trying to draw one symbol, ended up drawing the end symbol for a different, for the end of an area. So, and the fact that you can accidentally solve a world is a bit of an oversight. I feel like you could have had, like, for these like things over here, right? You could have a trigger or a flag in the code that says, okay, they can't solve the last puzzle until they have like the second one, right? They could have done something like that, but you can accidentally just beat an age, right? And that's why it's a bit weird. Also, because this is the main mechanic, there's not as much of a focus. There is some, but not as much focus on puzzles themselves. So, and now we finally move into the next one, which is Uru. Now, Uru, just to point this out at the beginning, Uru came out before Myst 5. So Myst 5 actually took some asset work from Uru. Another thing to point out is Uru was developed as an MMO. Last thing is, it is still technically going. You can play Myst Online, Uru Live or something like that, or Myst Live Uru Online or something like that. I can't remember what it's called, but you can find it. It is still a thing that is run by donations and stuff like that. So you can still play this, and it's free. So if you want to check this one out by yourself without spending any money, go for it. But Uru, of course, is where the biggest change, and the reason why I say it for last, is the biggest change in the design philosophy came because they were developing an MMO. Now, once again, that just because the design philosophy changed doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing. I think the design philosophy had to change in order to make it work as an MMO. So this game is where they kind of, with one exception, and we'll talk about that in a second, kind of went off more towards exploration and lore. If you want the biggest amount of Myst lore, this is the game to play. If you are just, you really got into Myst and you really want to know more, play Uru. It is full of great information. Now, I didn't really engage with the lore behind Myst as much as other people did, so we skipped over a good bit of the lore. One, for timing's sake, because there's some journals that are like 50 pages long. That might be a bit of exaggeration, like 30 pages long or so. Like, there's a lot of information there. But if you want to know anything about Myst, this is the greatest game for that. So the design philosophy changed, with the exception of Kaddish. Now, Kaddish, the whole world's a puzzle. The one caveat is they technically give you the solutions to every puzzle at the beginning. Here's the caveat. They give you the solutions under the guise of a different solution. That's very important. So, in Kaddish, you enter a chamber. It's this nice royal chamber, and you see all of these like iconography of different things, and most of that corresponds to a solution to a puzzle. Now, here's the thing. You can look at that solution and go, okay, I'm going to try that thing. And in most cases, it'll do what you want it to do. However, that's not the actual solution. You have to kind of reinterpret the data you're given to find the actual solution, right? that is probably the area I got most frustrated, and I think that's simply because the solution was there and we just didn't know how to. Well, I didn't know how to interpret it, and I'm sure led into the same frustration with a lot of other people. Now, again, this was an MMO, so this was a time where you can actually get your friends, family, or whoever your gaming friends together and kind of put your heads together and really solve stuff. So I think if you did that, maybe it wouldn't have been as frustrating. But I also postulated during the stream that it could actually make it more frustrating because everybody's going to want to try their solutions, and when no one's solution's working or whatever, it may cause issues, and one frustrated person makes another person frustrated, and then you just get this cycle of everybody being frustrated. So, but I didn't engage with it in multiplayer. We only engaged into it as a single player experience. I still do believe this fits into the Myst kind of design philosophy because of Kaddish. The other areas feel like they were more inspired by Riven, but like I said, the key to this game, especially like this world right here, is exploration. You're looking for these what are called journey cloths, and those journey cloths is how you like beat the world. Once you get all 7 journey cloths, you can go through a special door and then interact with the story. However, some of those journey cloths are hidden behind puzzles. This world in particular had an interesting one, but basically a singular puzzle. The rest of this world was about lore and exploring and figuring out why these two worlds are actually combined, and who took over, and why they're designed the way they are, why they look the way they do, right? So this one that's why I picked this picture, is because this one literally had one puzzle, and it was exploration based, which is interesting, right? But once again, you have to remember this was an MMO, so that makes sense. So that's us kind of going through the initial like series and information about it. We're going to go back here. I'm gonna leave that one up. So now talking about aesthetics. Overall, the aesthetics vary quite wildly as you go through the series, right? And I think that's what in most cases kept it kind of fresh. You never went into, almost never, I'll say almost never, went into an age and then like in the next game you had an age exactly like that, right? Every age still felt different, which is good. That's what you want from sequels and stuff like that. Aesthetically, they felt different, and they never, other than 3, they never did go back to the normal Myst kind of idea of here's a hub, here's your ages, past that. Now, they went back to that 3, and then basically never again. You can argue that 5 did it because they had the hub tower, but you didn't really engage with anything in the hub tower other than just making your way down. Like there was an elevator and fans, and that was basically it. That's all that hub had. But this one, it was like the hub had puzzles, and then each of the ages had puzzles, and it's the same thing for Myst 3. And then there's games like Uru and Riven, where there was a lot more focus on exploring every kind of nook and cranny. You get a bit of that in 3 with certain ages, but overall that was a very Riven experience. And I honestly can say I think Riven is the standalone series for the most taken or most departed from this original design philosophy. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think the reason why people like Riven so much is because of that deviation, right? It's not just, here's Myst 2, it's a new Myst Island with a few new things, right? If they had done that, probably wouldn't have been, right, and once again, speculation, probably wouldn't have been as strong of a sequel. But because Riven just went in a completely different design direction where it's more about exploring these islands and finding little hidden things and shapes and, you know, interacting with these things in certain ways, and like I said, it's more of a series of doors with slight puzzles in between. and the fact that you have to get information from basically the entire area in order to solve the big puzzle. That's a completely different mentality. I feel like that's why it got uh more attention, is because it wasn't just a let's create Myst 2, which is like Myst 1 but with more, it was just a complete different shift, which I think is what was really worked for it. Myst 3, of course, being a return to form. They did focus on like design. I feel like that was the last one where there was like aesthetics were taken into account. Um, like really taken into account, because once you get into 5, because the move to 3D movement, exploration and stuff, or not exploration, but the aesthetics and stuff were harder to do because they actually had to render objects, create and render objects. But where the old Mysts, they could use pre-rendered images, right? So that's this kind of design allows you to make things look really good because it's all rendered beforehand. Whereas when you look at this one, you can see, well, you can kind of see, other than the tablet, like this rock and stuff down here, you can kind of see everything had to be rendered effectively in real time. So they had to work as a real time thing. So that's kind of where the design philosophy also changed. Was Riven, because they probably had a bigger budget or a bigger team, they were able to move in and try new things with it. So I'm going to discuss my list for how I rank the Myst games. But I'm going to have my buddy here give you a hint for what my number 1 is. So if there's anybody in chat wants to take a guess on what my number 1 favorite Myst game is, I'll give you we'll give you 10 seconds on the clock and see if you can guess it. It is one of the numbered Mysts, 1 through 5. I will give you that much. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. You know what this is from. You can kind of figure that out. So let me pop back in here. Oop. Oh no, we're gonna get attacked. So here we go. This is my listing for my personal rankings of the Myst games based on how I engaged with them, and which I enjoyed the most. Now, once again, these are personal rankings. Your ranking might be different. Yeah, I was waiting for that. There's Cypher coming in with the unfollow. I'll go ahead and discuss why this is my list. So first is 3. I only had really a singular complaint with 3, and it wasn't a huge complaint. It was more like the visual fidelity caused me personally issues. But other than that, I really didn't have any complaints from Myst 3. I enjoyed it start to finish. The puzzles were the right level of difficulty. They took some like real logical thinking. I really enjoyed it. Even though we got stuck we forgot to go down the other side of a log. It happens. I couldn't really find much wrong with that one. And of course, we'll put the Myst Original second because it's the original, right? Like that was the design philosophy they were working from. Also, couldn't really find any issues with it. I felt like from start to finish, Myst just didn't really have much that it was like, oh, this is a bad idea, So, and then we move into Myst 2. The reason I put that higher on the list than I was originally anticipating is because I realized when you're playing through it, it can be very frustrating, very like, I would have never thought of that. But in hindsight, because of those risks, Riven is the standout title for the Myst series. Like if you say Riven, like in most cases that people will think of the League of Legends character, but in the context of Myst, like that is a lot of people's like standout title, and it's really understandable why, because they took a lot of risks, they did a lot of interesting things, and it's not one of those that you're confined to an area with a puzzle, which is like what I enjoy engaging with, but I definitely see a lot of people enjoying that the whole world is part of a puzzle, right? Very, very cool thing. Myst 4 I put next because the thing that the reason why Myst 4 isn't number 3 is because the aesthetics for the ages were rather kind of boring for me. Like I didn't enjoy, and the thing is I usually like dark aesthetics, but Spire was just kind of bland to look at, and then Haven was literally a jungle. Now, once you got to Serenia, the third age, that's where aesthetic really kicked in. But I feel like it was a little too late because you'd already had to play through at least one of the ages, if not both of them. I mean, you eventually have to play through both of them so you can get the information you need. Um, but that's why that's not higher, is because the aesthetic really kind of went down in comparison to Riven or 3 or Myst. And then we have Uru, which isn't last for, and the reason why I wanted to put it higher than Myst 5 is because if you love lore, that's your game. I personally was not getting into the lore, but if you like lore, that's your game. There is so much information there. That is, once again, it's free. You can still play it. It's up and going. I definitely recommend it if you haven't already. A lot of people will be like, "Would you recommend it?" Yes, I would recommend Uru if you're interested in any of the Myst lore, or if you just have time and you want to kind of explore the worlds that they had started to develop as an MMO. It's still very long. They had 2 expansions that we didn't play. But yeah, I would still give a good recommendation for Uru. And of course, last, Myst 5. Now, I something has to be last. I put Myst 5 last because it felt the least like a Myst game, and the tablet mechanic, although interesting, wasn't really well implemented, and it shows, right? And when your main mechanic can basically screw up your game, that's a real hard sell for me, because like I said, you can accidentally scribble something on your tablet, end up at the end of the age, tap a button, you're done. You didn't have to engage with anything. You just accidentally stumbled into the end, right? I feel like that's quite an oversight for that game. Now, it will be mentioned that Uru in its initial inception got canceled in a way, and some of those assets and that content ends up moving into Myst 5. So it is to point those out, but these are my personal rankings. If you guys in chat have played through the series, I'd be interested to see what you put as your number 1 for the series. Again, this does not include Abduction, because I feel like Abduction is not part of the Myst series; it's its own thing. But I feel like Abduction looked at all of these games and took the best of all of them and put them together. Abduction, I really had no complaints about, other than getting stuck in geometry occasionally. But that happens with other titles too. That's not specific to Abduction. But yeah, I'd be interested to see what you guys' number 1 is. Even if you just watched our playthrough, what you thought was the best Myst game. Once again, this is a personal ranking, but these are how I enjoy them. Also, this guy right here really helps Myst 3. He's for some reason I couldn't remember his name, but I've seen his face quite a bit, and I remember really liking his acting style. So in this game, he just goes all in, and it really works out for him. At least for me. A lot of people might think he's just a bit too outlandish, but I think it really worked, given what had happened, or what had apparently happened to him. So yeah, that's the ranking right there. This is a bit of a overview of the series. If you didn't get to, anybody here that didn't get to see any of these, or you haven't seen any of these, I do have videos in our video on demand down there at the bottom. They're all free to watch. You can watch through our playthrough and come up with your own list, come up with your own rank, and post, come into chat and be like, hey, after watching all of them or playing all of them, I think this one is the best, and then we can have a discussion why. I'm always open to having design discussions, especially about famous game series and why they're important. I think if it wasn't for Myst, we wouldn't have the type of puzzle games that we have today. I think this is probably one of the most influential series for the puzzle game genre. Outside of other point and clicks adventures. And now we'll talk about that in a little bit, but this is my listing. I gave some thought about it last night, and I just feel like this is the order in which it's also a generation thing, says Cyver, the ranking. Yeah, I think that plays a little bit of part of it. Coming from a later generation and not playing it at the time that it came out, that does change the mindset, because we can look back at all of them instead of being like, oh well, Myst 2 is the only one out, so Myst 3 has to be the next step, right? And so there's always going to be that difference. That is a good thing to point out. There's always going to be that difference of people that played it when it was coming out versus people that are playing it after the fact, like myself. And I will say for the record, and I did say this during the Myst 1, I had played probably like 15 minutes of the original Myst with my mom on the Sega Saturn. And that's about my only engagement with the entire series before this playthrough. So, I hope you enjoy this little retrospective. I intend to do this basically after every game series. Some of these will be longer, some of these will be shorter. I definitely recommend checking out. I mean, if you really want to, check it out, all of them. And Abduction, definitely check out Abduction. Abduction is my you must play if you like Myst. Check all these out. If you want me to pick 3, definitely the first 3. The original Myst, Riven, and Exile I feel are the strongest in the series. If you really want lore, play Uru. Also, gather up your friends. It's free to play. Jump online and engage with it in a multiplayer sense, and maybe you'll probably have a completely different experience than we did. The only one that's a hard recommendation, or basically it's not a recommendation, is 5, just because that tablet mechanic is very odd, and it doesn't always do what you want it to, and then other times it doesn't do the thing you want it to, and ends up doing something else, and it can be a bit odd. But that one's a bit of a hard sell. But the rest of them I do recommend playing if you get the chance. You can find all of them on GOG, not sponsored, by the way. You can find them on GOG or Good Old Games. All of those are available there. That's how we played them. But yeah, I hope you enjoy this retrospective. I like talking about game design. I like talking about game philosophy, and this is a real interesting way of kind of coming back and concluding the series. But yeah, play the Myst games, play Abduction. If you don't want to play any of the Myst games, play Abduction at least. Abduction is the spiritual successor to this series, done by the same people, and it is fantastic. I think it's really well done. Yeah. So that's going to be it for the retrospective here.